Hello everyone and welcome to the first Champions of Grazing Innovation, brought to you by the good people of MaiaGrazing. My name is Shida and I'll be handing you over to our co-host Cole Phelan and our featured champion Stuart Austin from Wilmot Cattle Co in a short while. Please sit back and relax and enjoy the next 30 minutes where we will feature Stuart's amazing innovation story, followed by a chance to have your questions answered by both Stuart and Cole. We will be muting all attendees, so type your questions out in the Q&A box directly in Zoom. Stuart, Cole, and myself will be able to see your questions there. If we don't get a chance to answer them, not to worry, we will come back to you on email. This series will be recorded and a copy of it will be sent to you along with some top tips. Without further ado, I'll be leaving you in the good hands of my teammate Cole. Over to you, Cole.
Thanks very much, Sheeta, and thanks for everyone joining us this evening or this morning. We've got people joining in from all over the world, which is fantastic. We've had nearly 300 registrations for today's session, which is wonderful. We'll kick things off because we're going to keep it reasonably brief tonight. Stuart, thanks for joining us. It's our first cab off the ranks as a grazing innovator. I thought I might just kick it off to learn a little bit more about you, Stu. For those in the audience, I think quite a few people probably do know you, but others may not. Besides being, a grazier from Ebor that, prides himself on pushing out 25 single-handed push-ups a day, tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from. You're down from Albury, and then you've spent time overseas and also in the top end of Australia, and how you wound up at Wilmot, and tell us a little bit about the business.
Thanks, Cole, and thanks MaiaGrazing for inviting me on tonight. It's quite an honour. I went so far as putting my good shirt on for you, Cole. And thanks for finding those couple of photos. The worst thing about it is that I don't have a hat on tonight, so it just shows that I have almost as little amount of hair as you do. So you've pretty well wrapped up my story, though. I did grow up in southern New South Wales, grew up just outside Albury. Went up north when I finished school, worked on a few cattle stations up there, and then spent 3 years in Canada, which was great. A real eye-opener and a great experience, and just made me realise that the rest of the world was not too far away. And ended up back in Northern Australia a few years ago. Got married to my wife Trish, and in about September 2016 we were just starting to think about heading somewhere else in Australia. Basically, we'd had a bit of holistic management trading by that point, been through grazing for profit, and that was what we wanted to do. That was how we wanted to be managing a business. So we were incredibly fortunate that this role came up here at Wilmot, and we came down here then. At that point, the business consisted of Wilmot, which is the property we live on, outside Ebor. It's absolutely extraordinary property, volcanic basalt soils, about 4,500 acres, and we turn over sort of 3,000 to 4,000 head a year on this place. We also have a property at Walker called Woodburn, about 6,000 acres. It's primarily a breeding operation, so we ordinarily would run 800 cows there, though ran that number down to a very low base through the drought, and have been in a rebuilding phase the last few months. And about 12 months ago, almost to the day, we acquired another property at Gunnedah called Morocco, which has added about another 4,000 acres out there. It includes about 400 acres of centre pivot irrigation. Really interesting and exciting property, quite a variety of soil types. And our goal there is to be growing permanent pasture under those pivots, such that every year, every winter, we can turn the tap on and be trading cattle right through winter out there when we don't have the capacity to do so here at Wilmot. So about when we bought that place, basically about 12 months ago, my role became a general manager of all three places. So now I spend most of my time in the office, unfortunately, and less time in the paddock. Not to say I don't enjoy the office and the challenges of it, but certainly enjoy the opportunity to get out the yards and in the paddock when I can.
And tell me, I'll jump in again there. Like, you know, I guess bringing things, into the technology space and your adoption of technology and what you've done with Wilmot Cattle Company. I mean, we've spent a fair bit of time together over the last few years, and you said your eyes really got opened up to the use of technology in agriculture while you're in Canada. What was it that sort of, sparked, I guess, that interest? And then how did you sort of, what was the motivator for bringing in technology to your operations with Wilmot Cattle Company?
I suppose that was, it was only 10 years ago. It was more than 10 years ago now. It makes me feel old. And at that point, it was sort of the start of precision agriculture, I guess. So I was on a broadacre farming operation. It was a seed grain business. And the bloke I was working for, we had a GPS in the seeding tractor, and all he knew how to do was make an AB line. He didn't know how to coverage map, didn't know how to set a boundary, didn't know any of that. And because I was young and had a bit of tech savvy, basically that became my job, was to set up the whole GPS system through the tractor, the header and the sprayer and so forth. So I learned all about it, and I suppose I don't know, it's always just been a bit of fun. And the other part of it, I suppose, is that it does bring some precision to the operation, that you're able to really optimize everything you're doing. That's what's happened here at Wilmot with all our technology here. The fundamental thing that I bang on about a lot, which a lot of people probably heard me say in the past, is that you can't measure what you can't manage what you don't measure. And I talk about that a lot, and everything we measure everything we do here, and there's incredible value in that we're able to optimize our production and profitability through doing so.
So I guess, you can't manage what you don't measure and so forth. So what was the key, I don't know, challenge or problem you were sort of trying to solve with utilising technology on a grass-based business?
So when we came to Wilmot, it was Bart describes this place as a Ferrari. It changes every day. When it gets going, it just gets cranking, and we grow a phenomenal amount of grass, and we really needed to understand or be able to optimize our stocking rate, the matching of our stocking rate to our carrying capacity. Wanting to know every day, okay, how much grass have we got now, and how many cattle have we got, and tomorrow have we got enough cattle, have we got not enough cattle, have we got too much grass or not enough grass. So that was the real driver. We needed a tool that was very dynamic, and we were able to I suppose use it every day in the business.
And I guess on that, Stu, something that, one of our real aims was sort of try and develop tools to almost democratize the adoption of grazing management planning and so forth. So how were you doing that prior to, the decision support tools like MaiaGrazing? Because, graze planning is not new.
No, it's not. And we started with a paper-based system when we got here, and it was basically at the dawn of MaiaGrazing, I suppose you could say. And we were also very lucky in that Maia effectively started and had its roots at Wilmot with Bart now. And so in effect, in some respects, Maia chose us, but we just picked it up and run with it. And one of the most enjoyable parts about that is that we've also been able to have a lot to do with the development of the product, and have it sort of, in essence, made sure it suits us. And it's just become such a valuable tool to us in terms of basically, like I say, managing our grass and managing our livestock every day, knowing exactly where we are on the bell curve of matching our stocking rate to carrying capacity or not.
So how do you actually do that? Like what are the sort of the key functionality or key features of MaiaGrazing that yourself or your team or investors or whatever, what are the key sort of things that you use, and what sort of effect does that actually have on you being able to effectively manage your stocking rate to carrying capacity?
For sure. So there's three key things that I just wanted to demonstrate tonight, and it was good to have a heads up from you earlier on that we're able to talk about this. I might just try and share my screen here, and I just sort of took a few screenshots earlier today to be able to demonstrate this tonight. So let me find the right screen here to share. Just a second.
And while you're doing that, Stu, I guess you know, thinking a bit more about, you know, the story of taking your education through to what you're doing now. I mean, we have place a huge value on education, and many of our customers actually have gone through, you know, quite significant training, like with RCS, Grazing for Profit, or in the States, Ranching for Profit, or other grazing courses. So how have you sort of invested in that space beyond yourself within the business?
Yeah, we have been right through the RCS training, and as well as we're now part of Executive Link. We've had a kit day here, and we've hosted a number of short courses and workshops. And you know, it's invaluable to us in that I'm just having a bit of a hard time sharing my screen here, but the biggest thing about Grazing for Profit, it just gives you such a great foundation to good grazing management and what they talk about in GFP being the three-legged pot, and also in KLR marketing, which we've done, and basically that's the how we try to operate here in our trading operation, managing our grass, our money, and our livestock inventories every day of the week. And GFP just gives you such a good foundation for doing that. And the additional thing, I suppose, out of GFP is the people aspect of it, and making sure that we're all living an enjoyable life.
Have you worked your screen out, Stu, or am I just playing havoc there?
Hang on a minute. Let me get with the program here.
No pressure. We've only got about 200 and something people on the call.
There it is. I found it.
Okay.
Right. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can.
So this is talking to Cole earlier today. We're talking about what we're going to talk about tonight, and I wanted to just demonstrate exactly how, you know, some of the three key things that we really use in MaiaGrazing every day of the week, or just about every day of the week. So right now, pertinent to this time of year, we are heading into our non-growing season here. Days are starting to cool off. We've had a couple of pretty solid frosts, and our soil temperature will be dropping. So somewhere through May, early June, effectively our growing will stop or slow right down, and we need to be able to make it through till about the end of September comfortably for us to know that our stocking rates match to our carrying capacity through our non-growing season. So this is effectively how we go through and make a non-growing season plan. I just made this today, and it's actually not far off reality. We put a start date in there, an end date of where we'd like to get to. Basically picked roughly what our stocking rate's going to be. So I've just picked a couple of mobs there to determine exactly what our stocking rate's going to be through winter. That will fluctuate because we've got sales happening through June, July and August. And there's a few cattle coming in. I picked all my paddocks here, and on the right-hand side over there, I have roughly estimated how many stock days per hectare we'd like to graze out of, you know, across the whole farm. How many stock days per hectare do we think we've got?
So just on that stock days per hectare, Stu, I know that we've got many people on the call that are very familiar with stock days per hectare, but
talking in Chinese. So it's a function of how many animals, how much grass. It's basically it's got an equivalent in kilos per hectare, or DDHs, I suppose you guys call them if you're in DSEs. It's effectively how many kilos of grass per hectare have we got. We're just talking a metric of stock days per hectare, which is what you would learn at GFP. So we start with all that information, we set all that up. There's our paddocks, there's our mob, there's an estimate of how much feed we think we've got across the farm. That then we're going to do one rotation, so we need to get through 120 days grazing, basically. So that puts all my paddocks in the list as I've selected them, which I can change as I like. And it says you're going to graze 80 stock days per hectare out of every paddock. What we actually do is go around and estimate in every paddock exactly how many stock days we'd like to graze. So some paddocks we might be grazing 90 stock days, some might have a bit more, we're grazing 100. there may be others that we're only going to graze 40 or 50 out of.
So
we can change that.
Just quickly, I mean, if my maths are correct, 80 stock days per hectare is roughly roughly half a tonne kilograms per hectare dry matter, 550 kilos.
Righto, thank you. So if we graze 80 stock days per hectare based on the size of the paddock, Maia will suggest that we spend 1.9 days in that paddock. We talk in 0.3s or 0.7s of a day. 0.3 is 8 hours, 0.7 is 16 hours. So we can talk in a day or a night. So if we spend that amount of time in the paddock, we'll take 83 stock days. We'll take 80 stock days. So we can override that and say we're going to spend 2 days in that paddock, 2 days in the next paddock. We're going to spend a bit less in that paddock because we don't want to take too much. We'd rather take a little bit too less rather than take too much. So we can work our way down the side here and changing the time period that we spend in the paddock. And if you, for those of you who are at our field day here in February, you'll recall Jim Gerrish talking about managing time, not space. And that's effectively what we're doing in the grazing plan is we're setting a period of time that we intend to spend in a paddock. As we go down the page here, you can see where I've chosen to graze a little bit more out of some of those paddocks. So it changes the amount of time that it suggests you spend in there in order to take that amount of feed out of that paddock. So that gives me the ability to set time, how many days I want to spend in each paddock or how much time I'd like to spend in there. And then there's about, I think this ended up being about 100 paddocks, this plan. We would only do this plan once a year, basically, and we'll update this plan every week, every fortnight. For the rest of the year, we're normally making graze plans that last about 30 to 60 days. And we just pick a set of paddocks that we intend to take that mob of cattle through. We're feed budgeting those paddocks. We're not feed budgeting every paddock on the farm and writing a graze plan for every paddock on the farm every week. We're only feed budgeting the paddocks that we're grazing in the near future. Through our growing season, because our country's always, our pasture is always growing through our growing season, so the amount of feed available is changing quite regularly. So you go right to the bottom of the page, and based on that stocking rate and that feed estimate, we just make it. You can see here we've got 1 day surplus feed. That would be 99% of our carrying capacity. So this, as I said, that's not the exact number that we'll take through winter. It will fluctuate. There'll be cattle going out in June, July and August. There may be a handful coming in, but certainly not as many as are going out. So we'd, if it's going to be that tight, we'll look at things again. And so, we need to adjust something here, and more than likely we need to adjust our stocking rate early on in our non-growing season to make sure that we give ourselves a bit of a buffer and some breathing space coming out the other end.
So when you're looking at that, Stu, and you're going through that plan, and I'm looking down the bottom there at the moment, it's saying 99% of carrying capacity. I look at that and you go, wow, that's really cutting it really fine. But that's not taking into consideration, correct me if I'm wrong, the residual that you've actually left, or the amount of feed that you're leaving to ensure that once you hit the growing season again, you've protected that natural resource base, your ground cover and so forth.
Yep, for sure.
So could you just talk a little bit about that?
Yep. So we for a start, there's always some growth. Grazing stimulates growth. So while we might say we want to, that's what we're going to graze out of each paddock, and through our non-grazing season, I will say that we do take a fairly solid graze. We use that opportunity to tune up some of our paddocks, eat some of that, eat or trample some of that rank feed, and get our paddocks back into a state, at the bottom of phase 2 growth, such that as soon as the sun comes out and the moisture starts in the spring, we start growing feed. But there is always a buffer. There's always feed to go back to. There's paddocks that are not included in this plan. If we really got tight, we could go and graze some of those paddocks if we needed to. But as I said, we'll update this plan every week or 2 weeks, and we'll constantly check the bottom line there to make sure that we're gaining days surplus. We're not getting into a deficit, I suppose.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fantastic, Stuart. Appreciate that. Look, There's many other things, I guess, as well that you've done there at Wilmot. I'm not sure, you may have another picture or two to show us, but
I just wanted to, if I can just quickly touch on a couple of other things here before I go. We're talking about the key features. That's our grazing chart, and the real reason that we look at our grazing chart is to check our rest period, make sure our rest period is going in the direction we want it. If it's getting shorter, then we've got too many cattle, we're overstocked, and if it's getting shorter than we desire, it means we've got too many cattle and we're overstocked. If at this stage of the year, we want that rest period to be getting longer because we're going into non-growing season. So we just kind of keep going back here and visually checking that, yes, we're, a stocking rate, our rest period, our recovery period is heading in the right direction.
So it's sort of,
and then ultimately that graze plan then informs this longer term forecast. So these forecasts, we punch in a rainfall forecast and a stocking rate forecast, and that green line there then determines where we're going to end up relative to our black line, which is our carrying capacity in the future. So this is a 12-month plan. I put this in today, and it's probably not that far from the truth. And so that gives us some confidence that we'll be well under our stocking rate right through until February, March next year. And one of the big things that drives that stocking rate up is a reduction in rainfall, because we had so much rainfall in February and March this year. And I'm forecasting only about 70% here. So those three things all kind of tie together. We write a short-term graze plan. We then forecast, based on those assumptions and what we know today, out over 6, 9, 12 months. And that then informs our forecast.
So is it really, the value of the grazing plan is it gives you that constant feedback loop that you can go back and revisit and do the replanning. Because I guess anyone can develop a simple graze plan once, but it's a matter of being able to have a continuous place to get that feedback, to be able to then to replan, because things in the real world out in the paddock change week to week. So you said you come back there. So in terms of looking at this, there's a lot going on in that graph there. So what the innovation side of it, how does this help you manage a grass business in a way that you wouldn't have been able to do 10 years ago? Or has the technology part of it sort of just made it easier to get to this point to make the decisions?
For sure, mate. And it really, the forecasting capability is one of the most powerful tools within MaiaGrazing, and we honestly make $1 million decisions with it on a regular basis, probably on a monthly basis. That green line and all that information that's summarised on that page there tells us so much about where we're going to be in 3 months and 6 months and 12 months, based on what we know today. And so we can make decisions today that will be executed in 3 months or 4 or 5 or 6 months based on our stocking rate. And they're seriously valuable decisions. I mean, if we're talking about destocking or restocking, and we all know the value of cattle these days. You only got to buy or sell 1,000 head, and you can pretty easily exchange $1 to $1.5 million. So we've got to, and we write our budget using these kind of tools. I mean, we're just about to write our budget, and this is the first thing we'll do is forecast our grass position forward.
Yeah, I guess something that I constantly hear from graziers or ranchers or what have you is they've actually always been in the position where they're not really actually valuing the value of the decisions they're making. They're not able to put a number on it. So is that something that you more easily do? You can understand the actual dollar value of the decision that you're making.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, I'll just get out of here for you now, but when we, whenever I talk to anyone about, AgTech or how we use it, it's probably the first thing I'll say is what's the value of the decision relative to the cost of the technology. And with regards to I don't even, the cost of our subscription is completely irrelevant to the value of the decisions that we make with it. And to give you a couple of other examples, we also use FarmBot. We've got a number of FarmBot monitors across Wilmot, and we're about to unroll them across Woodburn and Morocco. And not long after we bought them, so I can't remember what they cost, but it was a reasonable investment, upfront cost, and then there's a subscription. But within about the first month or two of having them, we put them over sale cattle into a paddock, into a holding paddock the night before we trucked them. And about 5:30 that afternoon, I got an alert to say that we'd, you know, that there was a tank dropping fast. Went around to have a look, and they'd knocked the float off the trough. I worked out that if they had shrunk an extra 3%, which they probably would have, given the stress of not having a drink that night, over 300 head that were 450 kilos, that saved me about $14,000. So they, you know, it paid for the farm overnight. We're also using Sapien, and I mean, some of those decisions that we make, just only a month ago, the market looked pretty uncertain. We decided that perhaps we should contract some cows to kill an hour. The market dropped about 50 cents that day, and we were able to lock them in. But we're able to, so we went into Sapien, pulled all our data out of there on those cows, and said which cows have made the highest gross margin today if we sell them today, based on their purchase price, their ADG, and their weight. And it's the thing about gross margin, it's not always the heaviest animals or the best performing animals, because purchase price has such a big part, plays such a big part in gross margin. So being able to do that, had the market stayed 50 cents below, you know, like had it stayed down at that level in a month's time when we plan to sell those cattle, selling them today made us about an extra 25 grand.
So it really just sort of seems, regardless of whether it's MaiaGrazing for the grazing management and balancing the stocking rate, carrying capacity, FarmBot for, you know, understanding the vulnerability, potential vulnerability of water and what that means to, you know, dollar value of lost production, or being able to make those real-time in-yard decisions. I guess they're really specific questions you're answering, aren't they? It's not just you know, being better organised and having good record keeping or whatever. You've got a specific, very specific, defined problem that you're trying to solve, and you understand, I guess, the risk that sits behind not making that decision.
For sure.
So,
and I, you know, I say to all our managers, and you know, to anyone that I speak to, you can only manage for what you know today, and it's one of the biggest things that KLR teaches you is not to speculate. You know, no one knows where the market's going to be in a month or two. Plenty of people can offer you advice on that, and there is one particular analyst that I do pay a subscription to, because I, you know, value his information and we use it for forecasting. But I try not to let the noise, you know, impact the decisions that we're making. All we do is deal with what we know today.
And it was good, like, you know, great example, you know, with the, you know, the potential tank loss of water, but say, okay, this had this sort of dollar impact, or potential impact, or what have you. You know, what would be a dollar return impact potentially on some of your grazing decisions that you've made on the basis of having MaiaGrazing and being able to either make a call early or destock, or what?
That's a big question, Cole. I couldn't tell you, to be honest. We have, with Bart and our paddock analytics, he has been able to determine the exact value of a stock day to us in this business per annum. It's in cents, and I can't tell you exactly what it is, but it effectively gives us a number that is not dissimilar to a feed conversion ratio in a feedlot. It's a fairly detailed metric, and it takes a lot of working out, but it can be done, and it's it's quite interesting.
And you know, we'll get to a couple of the questions very shortly, because we're running short on time. But you know, if you had to you know, share some of your wisdom, I guess, you know, no doubt you've had, I guess, being one of the early adopters of technology across the board, for grazing businesses. I mean, technology's been used in agriculture for a very long time, but I mean, it's sort of really getting to commonplace within livestock operations, or, you know, managing a natural resource base. It is fairly new. So you've probably taken a bit of skin off during that phase as well. What's been the key challenge of being, I guess, one of the early adopters of really taking on these technologies? You know, and on the flip side, what's been the, you know, or you've shared some of the upsides, but where does it all come out in the wash?
Patience is very important with technology, but going hand in hand with that is the outlook of the technology company. One of the fantastic things about MaiaGrazing, fantastic things about Sapien and FarmBot, all those guys, and I'm sure there's plenty of others, but in the experience we've had with those guys to date, everyone has a very positive outlook and a progressive mindset. And we've been so lucky being able to work so closely with MaiaGrazing in terms of letting you guys know what's working for us and what's not working for us and what we'd like the program to do. So that's probably the number one thing, and behind that is the support teams within each of those businesses. The strength of Maia is its support team are all girls who use this program every day. It's the same as Sapien. The fact that we can, I can pick up the phone and ring her up at any time of the day and get an answer to our question is terrific. And again, that outlook of them asking me why, what do I want to do? Why do I want to do it? What information am I trying to extract? And if it can't do it, most of you guys are trying to find a way to make it do it. So I need to understand the decision that I'm trying to make and what decision I want to make with that technology. So what's the value of that decision versus the cost of the technology? And 9 times out of 10, the value of the decision far outweighs the cost of the tech.
That's great, Stu. Look, I think we'll jump to a couple of, we've got quite a few questions sort of flowing in live, though we have had a bunch of questions come in prior to the webinar, which has been wonderful. So really appreciate everyone sending those in. And for all of the questions that we don't get through to today, we'll ensure that we send some personal follow-up responses either from myself or from Stuart. But I'll just jump to a question that's come in a couple of days ago. Question for Stu from Charlie Arnott. I'm not sure if Charlie does push-ups every day on Facebook, but I tend to see him every day on Facebook.
You might get a nomination.
Yeah, you might get one. We'll start to see him doing that shortly. But can MaiaGrazing help predict feed growth in a growing season, Stu, using estimated rainfall and paddock ratings, etc., throughout specific months of the year?
In my experience, Charlie, it can't yet. But I know, having spoken to Bart, been working with him for a few years, I don't think it's too far away. There is you would know of the feed wedge on your analytics dashboard. Right at the bottom of the page, there's a feed wedge there that changes over time. So no, it can't predict feed growth, but I don't think it's that far away where, we get to the point of enough information in there in terms of recording residual post graze. There should, the algorithm should start to be developed. Bart's all over it, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, it's a very exciting stream of work, as having the data there behind it, knowing what's actually being consumed out of the pastures under all different intensities and different seasons and rolling rainfall conditions. It's a very exciting piece of work that is on the radar.
Probably the only thing I'd add to that, Cole, is that while it can't do that for you, the ability and the capacity to feed budget is probably one of the greatest things I've ever learnt. And I'd have Tom Archer to thank for that. But that skill, I think, is one of the greatest skills that anyone can learn, such that, we're doing it, we're not actually relying on the technology to determine exactly how much feed we've got, we're actually determining that.
Yeah, thanks, Stu. I'll jump to another question, and I'm getting the hurry on a little bit because of the time, but that's okay. We'll punch these out and we'll wrap it up shortly. But another one from Richard. G'day, Stuart. Do you agree that raising soil carbon to at least 3% is a key to enlivening soil and gaining some fluctuating climate resilience through increased infiltration, aeration, and storage? And have you seen any research on measuring the nutrient density of plants and or stop consuming them from soils fitting the above question? And he's had a real go here. There's another sentence. And have you noticed a loss of numbers of dung beetles lately, increase of flies, and if so, do you support, do you suspect after effects of drought, rain, etc.?
Regarding nutrient density of food, I would say Richard Teague or Christine Jones would be the best source of information there. I'm sure there is information out there. Regarding the dung beetles, to be honest, I haven't checked, but I will. And I would suggest that they actually prefer a hot, the hotter, drier climate. So while we've been going through a bit of heat here, it's probably been quite favourable for the dungies at Ebor, but I'll check for you, Richard. And regarding the first question about soil carbon, absolutely. I mean, that's something we've focused on a lot here at Wilmot, and we've seen some terrific gains, and we're excited about what the future might hold. But the more carbon we can get in our soils, the more water we can hold, and that that relies on activating the soil biology and restoring the ecological function of the soil. So yes, raising soil carbon is critical to its success in the future.
Thanks, Stu. One's come in for me. Basically, it's saying it's been great to hear how Stuart's been able to use MaiaGrazing, but I can tell you firsthand that our grazing business is nothing like Wilmot out at Ebor. I know everyone does have the perception that you're out there on the grassy knoll and it all just grows and what have you. There's a huge amount of management that runs behind that. So that's the question for me. How can MaiaGrazing be relevant to my context? And it's a great question. And the thing is, everyone's grazing context is different. From you out there at Ebor, even to the other properties in the Wilmot Cattle Company, huge variations and differences. But I think the fundamental key, and you've sort of touched on it, is the support team. We have a fantastic technology and so forth that sits under the hood, and that's great. But ultimately, we are a people business. And when people come on board with MaiaGrazing, our support team, who are all graziers themselves that utilise MaiaGrazing, but work for us as well, work hand in glove with our customers to ensure that the structure of MaiaGrazing is set up to meet their operational businesses, to meet their climate zones, to get all the structural things right. So then it's a lot more than it's not a whole lot more than actually recording what you do. And then when you get into the graze planning elements, you start to become a bit of a ninja like Stu here. But I think a core element of the success and why it is relevant is the support side of things. But Stu sort of touched on that a little bit. Next one, we've got two other questions and then we'll wrap it up. They're really quite sort of similar. One from Tamsin. I understand the principle of cell-timed grazing, but initially when all your land is overgrazed and bare, how do you start? And a related question just here as well is, if you took a property in a high rainfall zone, i.e. high potential productivity, that was one big paddock, but also very low productivity due to low soil phosphorus, sulfur, pH, etc., what would you consider the highest priority, Stu, fencing or fertility? So those two questions are, somewhat related. So you might be able to cover that off. And that was from Todd Andrews there.
For sure. So in answer to the first question, that was effectively what we took on it when we bought Morocco. That place was extremely overgrazed. We did not buy a blade of grass when we bought the place. So the first thing we did was enable some rest and recovery there. And we, we have a very basic saying: if we don't have grass, we don't have cattle, and that was the case out there. So it wasn't until we had any grass, had some rainfall, grew some grass that we before we took on any animals. The second part of that question from Todd there around fencing or fertility, fencing every day of the week. Terry McCosker proved this 30 years ago in cell grazing. And the value of subdivision, and Bart's more recently, put some terrific numbers together from MaiaGrazing around Woodburn, and any paddock that we have subdivided there, and Bart will jump down my throat if I'm wrong here, but basically every paddock we've subdivided, we've seen a 50 to 300% improvement in graze yield from those paddocks, from pre-subdivision to post-subdivision. So we've, that's effectively the same question we had to ask ourselves when we bought Morocco. Would we subdivide it or work on pasture improvement? And we are using a multi-species forage mix down there to kickstart the soil health and the biology of the soil. But that also, which then also enables us to subdivide that country and graze at a fairly high density and deposit nutrient in a very confined area, I suppose, deposit nutrient at a high density, and that's, we're confident that's what will see us restore the health of that and the ecological function of that landscape there.
So how far are you going to go? I know, back in February, Jim Gerrish, when he was out at the MaiaGrazing field day at Wilmot or what have you, he was saying, you need to go further. What's your view on that? Or, roughly what's your size there at the moment, and what would happen?
Look, there's no high density grazing there just yet. Well, there is relatively high density. Brent's got about 1,000 head on out there. One mob of about 700 and another of 300, and they'll be combined fairly shortly. And I suppose some of our paddocks down there are, only 10 or 15 hectares. So it's reasonably high density. But once we get onto that, some of that annual forage, we'll tighten that up even more, knowing that, provided we've got the water supply there, we can be shifting cattle on the daily.
Great. Well, I think we're out of time, Stu. We're going to have to hand back over to Sheeta, but it's thanks so much for making the time. You've been a fantastic champion of grazing innovation. Thanks for getting helping us kick that off. Over to you, Sheeta, and that's signing off from me, and we'll see you next time, everyone. But here's Sheeta for some closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stu. That was very insightful, and Colin, thanks for being such a great interviewer. You all have been extremely generous with your time with us, and I hope you enjoyed our first session. We will be featuring Maddie Coleman in our next champion series, which will be in June. So look out for that. Hope you can join us. And on behalf of the Maia family, thank you so much for your time. Over and out.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it.